So let's talk about drill bits. Drilling holes seems like such a simple idea, and when you're getting started in woodworking, what do? You grab yourself a little cordless drill, or you do it hipster style with a egg beater, and you buy a box of drill bits. They come everywhere. I mean, they're on sale almost all the time. $9.99, $14.99, $19.99, the whole big sets of them. Now, there's a general rule in woodworking. If something is priced as $19.99, probably you're not getting 20 bucks worth of value out of it. Now, this might seem simple. Buy the tools, start making holes, but if you're working in fine woodworking, making really tight tolerances, there is a difference between the bits. That's what we're going to discuss today. The majority of drill bits that are actually sold today, I wouldn't really consider woodworking drill bits. We've used them for woodworking forever, but they aren't really designed for that one. This is the typical box you would find, and here's a key difference. It all comes down to the cutting action. These twist style bits are probably the most common drill bits out there, and I really like them for general use because they're pretty much infinitely sharpenable. In fact, most grinders, when you buy them, one of the platforms is going to have a groove cut out into them that just so happens to be the most common angle you find in these things. So you can drop it in that groove and rotate it, and it will sharpen the bit. And so you can sharpen these things for your lifetime. So one set could last you a good long time. I mean, there's a lot of life in this bit here. And I think that's probably why these are so commonly found, is because craftspeople know that they can be resharpened and reused. So even after they dull them a little bit, they'll throw them in a coffee can with the idea that they will sharpen them in the future, and they just never get around to it because pretty much they're fairly cheap, so they just buy a new one. But this kind of bit is horrible for woodworking because of the cutting edge. And isn't that a recurring theme in all my videos? If you get a chance, watch my introduction to woodworking video, and it talks all about cutting edges. This is more of a ripping style blade, which means there's nothing out there that cross cuts fibers. There's nothing going to sever those fibers. All it really wants to do is go with the grain this way or that way. So whenever it does turn the corner, it just tears up those fibers and makes it really, really rough. Now, if you just sharpen them, it might get a fairly clean cut, but that's unlikely. Plus the fact, there's nothing about this bit, the style bit, that causes it to want to go straight. It will want to wander around to the path of least resistance. So if you have a board that's like southern yellow pine, very soft early growth, very hard late growth, well, it will kind of wander in the cut. And it's extremely hard to start it with this thin flat point in wood, even if you've got a pilot hole or you put a dimple in the wood as a reference point. Woodworkers really, this is the kind of bit you keep around simply for cutting PVC, cutting plastic, cutting into soft ferrous metals. It's just a general bit that you use when you don't want to damage your good bits. A good bit for woodworkers has a couple key factors. You're going to have this lead brad point. That's going to allow it to go straight through early growth and late growth. It's going to track very, very well. But I also want you to notice these wings. See how they come forward a little bit? They're actually designed so that it will it will cross-cut the wood and then allow the flat part to plane it. So you have both the cross-cutting and planing blade, because these are designed for materials that is not homogeneous, where these homogeneous material is preferred. The bad thing about these is it's a lot more difficult to sharpen them. You can't really do it on a machine. You've got to sharpen each little point, and they burn up fairly quickly because they aren't really meant for our high-speed drills. You know, some of us put them in level 2 and then just have at it, and that develops a lot of heat. These are actually a lot better suited for something like our egg beater drills because we just go a lot slower when we're working with them. They're not going to develop as much heat, so you're not going to change, it just doesn't abrade as quickly. And another thing about these is they work good backwards to get them started. So if you want to drill an accurate hole, generally you take your little punch or your awl, you start the hole with a little dimple there, and that allows you to position your brad point very, very accurately. And then if you just start going forward, it'll cut the hole very nicely. I'm going to lower the speed down to 1. But I want you to notice how torn up that edge is right there. Okay? That is not the way this drill bit is designed to go. What it's designed to do is, let's get the accurate hole started up. Now I'm going to go backwards. See, it's going backwards now. I'm going to start the hole backwards. And then I'll go forward. And I want you to look at how much cleaner that hole is. And a little bit tear out there, but I mean, even scrubbing out. A lot cleaner hole cutting out. Now let's try that twist bit. I'll do my best to be the same situation. I give you a pilot hole, a little dimple. Now if you're doing this in a drill press, it might be a little bit more accurate. So I come up. This is a brand new bit, so it should be pretty sharp. And look at the hole. It's a lot rougher, a lot crisp. I mean, it's just a lot rougher. It was more efficient, but the results speak for themselves. But I do want you to be wary of something. A lot of people will look at this design, which is what they call a pilot point. Hey, it has a little bit of a lead section, but notice the side wings. Are they angled forward or back? They're leaning back ever so slightly. So you're going to have the same aspect of it not cutting on the outside first to score the grain when it's going across it and just going with it. So let's check out the results. Come over, drop it into that pilot hole. It tracks a lot easier, so let's go backwards first. It is not scoring a hole. It's compressing those fibers, but not scoring the hole. So go forward. A lot rougher. Strangely, this might be the worst of them all, even though it gives the appearance of having the more expensive, more harder to manufacture brad point style. So just be a wary buyer. Also, when you're buying these things, understand you only need to buy the size that you're going to be using. And you don't really have to have a full set. I mean, these are the drill bits I use almost all the time. I have a metric set because I did do some pin turning sometimes and it seems everything was done in metric. And then I have my imperial set. And of these, I can guarantee you I use the 1/8, the 1/4, the 5/16 occasionally, the 3/8, and the half. So about 6 bits, and that's pretty much all I ever use. And coincidentally, there are a lot of manufacturers, good woodworking retailers that sell cases of woodworking bits, real woodworking bits, and what do they come in? They generally come in a set roughly those sizes. So I always recommend that you get a few smaller ones and then a mid-range size that you might use for dowel joinery, and don't worry about the rest unless you need them for a specific project, because a lot of times you'll just use what you have. If you need dowels and you have a 3/8 dowel bit instead of a 1/2 inch, 3/8 is going to be just fine. And as I said earlier, always be aware of those 19.99 specials. They're probably selling you a lot of stuff that you don't need. I don't know where I read it, but there's an article that really went into this phenomenon, and you know, when I was reading the article, I remember falling into that trap, because there was a time when I bought bits by the bulk. And guess what? They were $19.99. But they talked about these kinds of kits in that article, and they said, yeah, they can produce them for this price because pretty much none of them are hardened except for the 1/4 inch, the 3/8 inch, and the 1/2 inch. because that's all anybody ever used. And in normal use, what you found is people use these up and then they bought a whole new kit just to replace those 3 sizes. I'm not sure if I bought this kit or my dad did, but we have the normal twist grit sides and brad point versions of the same thing. And having used the brad points, I can tell you they weren't hardened because they burned up like that. So the moral of that lesson to me was, hey, just buy the tools you need for your project and buy good quality ones. At that, they'll last you a lifetime, and if you need them in one project, you'll probably need them in the other. Don't buy tools on spec for things you might need in the future. One of the things I worry about in this digital age is the dilution of knowledge. The diluting of knowledge. Because people like me, you know, I might spend 4 or 5 years learning a skill like bowl turning or something like that, and I can show a video, I can show you the techniques, but I have this awesome platform where, being from the digital generation, or actually it's a little bit before the digital generation, I've learned how to use my voice in this area. So I can communicate to a lot of people, so I might get credit for a lot more knowledge than I actually have. And I think that's across the board. You look at people my age on this platform, we are learning stuff and then presenting it to you so you learn from us. What is lost is the intricacies, the details of the skill. Now, a lot of the people I've learned from over the years, well, they're from the book and magazine generation. They wrote really detailed articles. Maybe you saw them in live interviews on TVs, where just getting into the digital age, people would film them, but they weren't doing the work themselves. In the green woodworking movement, I really liked Robin and JoJo Wood. I've learned a lot of what I know from observing them, seeing the videos, seeing their writings, that kind of stuff. And I found this guy, Willie Sundqvist. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, because he was a guy that influenced them. This book was written in the 80s. I think it started getting produced in the 90s, and it was revolutionary at the time. Swedish carving techniques. And what I love about it, it predates a lot of the hipster kind of hippie fluff that we deal with a lot of times today. The lifestyle of the woodworker, the aura of the wood, you know, the good feeling. I mean, he goes through a lot of that BS and really gets down to detailed techniques. He's explaining why I think edges work the way they do, interact with the wood. It comes from a lifetime of experience, and the way he writes, he doesn't skip over the stuff that might be second nature to him, that we, as new woodworkers, might not pick up just watching him or reading their books. He goes into really great detail. Swedish carving techniques with Willie Sundqvist. If you don't have this thing in your collection, even if you are not a green woodworker, you need to go get it. I'll put a link to the Amazon. It is still being made. It was that influential. It's just black and white pictures. I think they updated the pictures at some time. But really well written, well explained. A great book for woodworkers.